Hi, and welcome to our third episode of our World of Publishing webinar series, the final episode for this semester, though we will be back in the spring. My name is Lamar Giles, and I have been a professional storyteller for nearly 25 years. I've published over a dozen novels, have written for DC Comics, Star Wars, National Geographic, and even Nike. I'm William and Mary's inaugural writer in residence, and I'm hoping to engage the William and Mary community in fun and exciting ways that promote our incredible library, literacy, and general creative pursuits. The World of Publishing webinar series offers insightful conversations with publishing professionals to demystify the often perplexing process for anyone who's ever wondered, how do I get published? It is suitable for the career-minded writer, the casual writer, the student writer, and those who are simply curious. This session will be recorded and available for those who are unable to join us live today. But for those in the session, a Q&A box is available at the bottom of the window for you to submit the questions that we will attempt to address either during the conversation or during a designated Q&A session before we close out. And without further delay, let's meet today's guest. Dhonielle Clayton is a New York Times bestselling author of the Controversy series, the Bell series, Shattered Midnight, co-author of Blackout, Whiteout, The Rumor Game, and of the Tiny Pretty Things duology, a Netflix original series. She hails from the Washington, D.C. suburbs on the Maryland side. She taught secondary school for several years and is a former elementary and middle school librarian. She is board chair of the nonprofit We Need Diverse Books. She is the president and founder of Cake Creative and Electric Postcard Entertainment, IP story companies creating diverse books for all ages. She's an avid traveler and always on the hunt for magic and mischief. Welcome, Dhonielle. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Of course I am. Of course I am. Long night. Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And we'll just get right into it. I want to hear about your first big break in publishing. How did it happen?
What do you define as big break? You mean when they said yes and let
Yes,
me in as a tiny menace?
yes.
Okay. It took me 8 books and like 7 years to get my first yes and 3 agents. So it was a long, long road. And I had written many, many books and queried. I worked for a literary agent trying to learn about the business. And I just kept piling up those rejections. And this was like around 2009, 10, and 11 as I was trying to make inroads into publishing. And that first yes came with Tiny Pretty Things after doing like 3 or 4 rewrites. And finally, an agent was like, I was with an agent, and then the agent was like, oh, this isn't working. They didn't like the revisions. And then we were like, I have to go. And then the next agent was like, let's do this. Let's try. And I did another pass on the manuscript, and then it sold at auction with it 2 weeks later.
Well,
So, but that took a long time. That was a long road.
and it took a long time, but I don't know if that's an uncommon situation. I went through something similar, and I think it's worth reiterating for all those who are out there and currently going through the process. You mentioned taking several books, many rejections. I went through the same process. So anybody who's out there going through it, it's just more evidence of the writer who gets published is the one who doesn't stop.
Correct. And so many rejections. I think I had 232 rejections, saved all
Hmm.
of them,
Hmm.
and none of it was wasted effort. All of those books that I wrote got me closer and closer, and I still go back and excavate old things that I made and try to say like, okay, what can I do with this now? So,
And were you always looking to write for young people?
yes, absolutely. Um, I came to this, I always say that I failed into this job. I wanted to be a doctor, and then I failed chemistry when I was in college because chemistry is really hard, and tedious and boring. And my parents were sort of like, you better figure it out, girl, like, what you want to do. And I was miserable being away from home for the first time because I'm a spoiled brat. And my dad reminded me, he's like, go to the bookstore, get a new book, read, like, do the things that make you feel calm. And I did that, and I thought, maybe I should major in English. Maybe I could be a librarian and a teacher. And then that's could be my career. And so I went down that path, and I was a librarian and teacher for many years. And then my students in East Harlem, New York, hated to read. And that was the first time I confronted like that, like, oh, how could you hate to read? And I realized it was because they weren't seeing themselves on the page. This was around 2012.
So,
And
so I'm sorry, I
yeah,
don't mean to interrupt you, but you
sure.
bring up something interesting that I want to get at because you mentioned being a teacher and a librarian, and you're meeting these young people who don't like to read. You trying to create fiction at that point. How does that influence what you're doing? Does it change anything you were doing up to that point?
Yes, because I didn't think I could be a writer. I thought writers were really dead people. And like you wrote a book, you died, and then your book got put in the library or like on the bookshelf. I didn't have any idea of how the thing that I loved the most was made. I just loved to read. And so I came at this from a reader. And I didn't know that I could really be a writer. And I'd gotten a master's in children's literature to help me with my teaching career and being a librarian, but never thought I was forced to take a writing class, getting my master's degree. And that was the first time I'd ever taken a writing class. And I had a professor who said, I know you want to be a teacher and you want to be a librarian, but you're a writer. And I was like, I'm not a writer. I'm just a reader. I know how to tell people what to read. So I found this career a little later. A lot of writers are like, I always wrote. I loved writing. But for me, my mother, I asked her, I said, did I write as a kid? She was like, you would make newspapers, but that was the extent of my writing. So I found this career through my students asking me to write them into books because they wanted fun stuff. And so that's how I got here because fourth graders are really bossy.
This is true. This is
Mm,
true. But so, okay, so you're a writer, you've made it through the querying process, you're published.
mhm,
But as we mentioned at the top, you also founded these companies, these IP story companies, K Creative and Electric
mhm.
Postcard Entertainment. So I got like a two-parter for you. First, what is an IP story company?
Yes.
And second, what are the distinctions between Cake Creative and Electric Postcard Entertainment?
Okay, so this all again leads back to my library. So as I was putting books on the shelf, I noticed like certain writers had books out every 6 months that I had to purchase. I was like, how is anybody keeping up with this? And then I opened up the book and I looked at the copyright line and I was like, oh, the person who wrote this book and the copyright, it's not the same. And then I read the back and the acknowledgments and I was like, oh, there's a team here. And then I learned that many books in the children's space are what are called packaged. And then I went down a rabbit hole and I said, okay, what does that mean? And I learned that this idea of packaging was happening in like the 1890s, where there was a group there was a company, I think it's called the Stratamere Syndicate, where like the books called like the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and books like that were created by a team of people in a room, and then different writers were writing under a pen name so that they could meet the demand of people who wanted to read those books. And I thought, oh, this is very interesting as a model to both be able to sharpen your writer tools in your toolbox to be able to write to an outline and learn how story can be built right in someone else's sandbox, figure out how to find your own voice within that, but also to pay your bills at the same time doing writing work. And then I did more research and found that there were several companies that did this, and they were lots of books that were on my shelf, like Pretty Little Liars, The Babysitter's Club, those Warrior Cat books. I was like, there's much more here. And I thought, how can I do this, but then center my students? East Harlem, New York is a very diverse place full of most of my students were first and second generation from all over the world. And they were having a hard time being excited about literature, like I said, because whenever they found themselves as teachable lessons, or the bruises of their backgrounds were what the books were about. And they just wanted to read books about kids who went to outer space, kids who were full of the drama. You know what I mean? They wanted the fun. And I thought, what if I was able to, once I broke into publishing, be able to provide a model for other people to get in? Because I have a lot of story ideas because I'm a big reader, so that it took me so long to get in that I knew, and I had privileges to being able to move to New York, being in the center of publishing, going to publishing parties, meeting people, all of that, that I needed to create a runway to be able to shorten that gap between an emerging writer and getting into publishing. And I thought if I could give someone a piece of my own IP, teach them what I know, and then show them how to come into the industry using a story that I built, it could then lead them to making the connections they needed to get their own original work published. So that, in a nutshell, basically an IP company is a person or a group of people who come up with an idea, and then they hire a writer to write that idea. And a good packager, you get a share of the profits of those things. Sometimes when you're writing for Hardy Boys or something like that, it is a flat fee, but that's not how I work. I believe in participation all the way through. And then that book gets ushered through the publication process and becomes a book on the shelves. And so the difference between the two companies, Cake Creative is for my little ones, for the my little students. It's my middle grade imprint sort of thing, focusing on books for young readers. And then Electric Postcard has and young adult crossover books that I've been doing. And so I have almost 100 books on the shelves now, which is so weird.
That's a wild number. And I'm
I
gonna come
know.
back to that because I have a bunch of questions. You're one of the busiest people I know, and I'm always curious about balance. Like I'm always like,
Mhm.
how is D doing all this? I want to know more. But we have a question from our guest. This is from Frank Finn. And he says, Your IP story company sounds like what James Patterson does. Is that a fair comparison?
Well, James Patterson, he comes up with ideas, but then he constructs them like I do, but he puts his name on every book. I don't put my name on anything.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want the writer to be able to have their name or the pen name that they've chosen on the book so that they can use that as a launch pad for all of their other work. And it's just a different form of what James is doing, but I don't want my name on all of those books because I want to really spotlight and launch that creator in their space. And I'm doing diverse books across all categories. So my name shouldn't be on a book that is about Mexican witches because I am not Mexican, but my
Right.
writer is Mexican and she has that authority. And so, therefore, her name being on the book brings more value. But I created the story and the characters and the world and the plot, and I showed her and coached her through writing it. So, just
Well,
two different ways.
you mentioned like creating a runway because you knew the difficulty you had trying to get into this industry. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious, like from your perspective, if a writer comes through Cake or Electric Postcard, is the idea that they do a book or two with you and then they're propelled into their own career? Or could a writer conceivably just do projects with you for the duration of their career?
Oh, yes. So that's such a great question. I kind of have a 1 to 2 book or 1 or 2 series limit because
Mm,
what the point is that I am helping to launch you and I'm giving you all the tools you need in your toolbox, both showing you how I've made a pitch, how I've made a story engine, how I've created really good plot and characters and world building, and then showed you the editorial process. I've showed you what contracts look like, deal memos look like, talk to you about how all of the sausage is made in publishing. I'm hoping that, and I've introduced you to an editor that hopefully it goes well, that you're so excited about continuing to work with them, that, you know, it's time, it'll be for you to be able to use those connections that I have set up and maximize them for your original work and take everything you learned from me and apply it to your original work. And I usually help my writers find agents when they're ready. Some of them aren't. I have to push them and I'll say, let's make a list. Let me look at your query for your original book. Let's talk about how your next book is in conversation with the books that we did together so that you can build upon the runway and the launch pad. So it's really me trying to help them strategize because that's what I think a lot of marginalized communities don't get is someone to sit down and strategize with them. So no, they can't stay with me forever. They can stay with me for 2 series or 1 or 2 books, and then I try to help them find their way.
Um, we have another viewer question. This is a
Sure.
little bit of behind the scenes. This is from Clarissa. Will you explain a little bit more about the auction process?
Oh, okay. Yes, sure. So I mean, it is the dream that your book goes to auction, meaning that more than one publisher would love to publish your book. But you really only need one offer or two offers, right? But an auction can go in many different ways. So your literary agent sends out a book to a set of editors, and those editors are like, yay, this is if you're going to get everything you want and the universe lines up perfectly. 5 authors are like, oh, I mean, editors are like, oh, we love this. We're obsessed. Your agent says, great, we have interest. We're going to set up an auction. And there are several ways that literary agents can set up auctions. The way that I've typically been in an auction for my work is that my agent will say, okay, this is the closing date. I need your opening bid by noon or 9 a.m. on this date. Then each editor goes to their team and gets their ducks in a row and puts in their first bid. And then your agent will come to you and say, okay, these 5 editors, here's what they've put forth. I'm going to ask for an improved number in 2 days. And then you have that. And sometimes you'll get to meet with each editor beforehand, before the auction starts, so that you can get a feeling of who you like and how they, want to publish you, and see a taste of the marketing plans. And then sometimes it'll be, 2 rounds of that, and then there'll be a best offer. And they might go back and forth. So there's many different ways to set up an auction, but it's definitely the dream is that your book goes up so that you have choices, and also so that you can feel compensated for your work on a high level. But that is definitely the dream. It doesn't always happen. Very rarely does it happen.
So before we get to the auction process, I have a question about just even project development. When you do the sort of work you do with an IP company and you're guiding a project through the various development stages, what makes a partnership successful with a newer writer?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I think a collaborative spirit and a person who wants to learn, right? So I come from an MFA background, and I also have a master's in children's literature. So I know what the MFA looks like. And so when you come into sort of the IP space, it's a reminder that one, you're working in a sandbox that you didn't build, right? So there's some sort of limitations, and understanding that the IP holder, meaning me and my company, have parameters, and coming with that collaborative spirit, being like, here are some things that I'm really excited about, here are some things can we discuss, right, if you want to make changes, and just always asking questions, being very communicative, and being excited about learning, asking the questions of how did you make this thing, why, trying to dig into those things so that you can access those things as you're writing it, and having an understanding that you'll be able to leave your stamp on it, but thinking of it as an opportunity to get paid for your writing and paid to sharpen your tools, but also to be introduced and led into publishing in a different way. It is different. It's not your original work, but you are leaving your signature flavor on it, right? And wanting to be able to maximize all of those opportunities. I wish that I had known about this way of coming into publishing when I was starting out, because I probably would have tried it out so that I could probably enter a little faster, or at least get some more tools in my toolbox. So I got more yeses than nos in those
Right.
232 rejections, which was a lot.
Understood. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, hey, you did the thing. We've all been through that stage of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
got a couple of viewer questions. Let's see. This is from Kelsey. First, she says, hi, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. I really loved Blackout when I read it a few years back. At what stage do you feel ready to share a manuscript with an agent? And when do you feel ready to share it with a potential publisher?
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much. For the blackout love. I appreciate it. When I In terms of sharing a manuscript with an agent, I mean, the test of a writer, and Lamar, you can talk about this too, I think comes down to revision. And can you revise? That's what an agent wants to see, and that's what an editor wants to see. So if I'm making a manuscript and writing a manuscript, I write it and then I put it away for a couple weeks and then take it out again. And I do at least 2 to 3 revisions on it, and I'll share it with a trusted reader without telling them, you know, anything I'm struggling with, to see their feedback, and I get feedback, and I'll do a few drafts. And then once I feel like I've taken it as far as I can go and I can't see anything else that needs fixing, and for me, that's about 3 drafts,
Mm.
then I feel ready to share it with an agent. And in terms of a publisher, I won't be sharing my work with a publisher if it's not through an agent. So I go, you know, the agent part is really key first.
And I will co-sign the revision thing. I tell anybody, if you read one of my books, you're reading the fifth version at minimum.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's
Absolutely.
the seventh, eighth version, depending on how hard it was for me to get there. So revision is key. Revise, 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 folks. We have
Hmm.
another question from Sheila.
Hmm.
It's a two-parter. Do you only work with authors for novels versus essays or poems? And
Yes,
are
only
you
novels.
only novels? And are you open to older writers as opposed to like younger writers coming?
I'm open to all writers. Uh, I wasn't a young writer when I started, so and there is no age limit on being a writer. So I'm open to
Yeah,
writers who want to write and want to make good work.
excellent, excellent. We have a question from Anonymous. Is the publishing world the same or different for writers of comics and graphic novels? I can speak a little bit to this too,
Yeah, you
D,
speak
if
on
you
that. Yeah,
okay.
go ahead. You take that one.
So it depends. Like if you're talking about an original graphic novel or comic, it's probably going to be very different because it'll be a little bit of a tough sell to sell a graphic novel script to a lot of the publishers that aren't comic book publishers already. It's not impossible. It's probably a more frequent thing to be able to come in and say, if you're a skilled comic book graphic novel writer, to do some work for some of the big companies. When you see people trying to do their own original graphic novels a lot these days, it tends to be independent publishers. You see a lot of Kickstarters. Um, it just depends. It's helpful if you're able to do the art and the script yourself, or if you have that relationship with an artist already. But it's not quite the same walk as trying to sell just a prose manuscript, if that helps at all. Let's see. We have another question from Chris. What criteria do you use to determine if you will work with a person? And do you ever turn potential authors away?
Okay, so I have a submittable that's on the website for Kate Creative and for Electric Postcard Entertainment. And so it goes through a series of questions and ask for a cover letter. And so it goes through sort of the criteria. And the criteria is different for the different things I'm doing. I also have a horror platform that and dark fiction platform that's called Chain Letter that we publish on Substack. And so that criteria is if you are interested in horror, right? So it's all about sort of what you're interested in and what you want to sort of make, what themes you're interested in, what magical creatures, what genres, all of that stuff. So it's really about, are you ready for collaborative work? Do you want to work in the IP space? Do you want that experience and understanding sort of, you know, that it is different than when you're just writing your own thing? Um, and so the criteria is sort of on the website, but there is no hard and fast rules. It's, I'm looking for, do you have voice and are you interested in collaborating?
I just got to tell this story. The Chain Letter horror platform.
Yes.
Dhonielle sent me a promo box when she started this, and I got the box at my house, and I go to open it up, and when I open it, the box started screaming. I'd
I
never
didn't
seen
tell
anything like
you.
it before. And my wife's upstairs, like, what is that noise? My daughter comes running, and it's just this box screaming in my face. It had a bunch of cool stuff in it, and it's one of the coolest promotional boxes I ever got. But man, you need to warn people about stuff like that, Danielle.
I know, but I did say on the box, this is all in good fun because I thought somebody would be like, this is so mean or whatever. But, you know, it's horror. They're
Yeah,
screaming.
it was fun. It's one of the coolest ones I ever got. So like, how do you balance writing your own books with running two companies or three companies, I guess, if you count Chain Letter?
Sure. I mean, I was a teacher for over a decade and I had to keep 35 small folk, you know, like of the 9 and 10-year-old variety, like alive and well, and also like get their literacy rates where they need to be and make sure they're doing their homework and make sure we're doing our testing and all of that. So to me, it's really light work when you're not in a classroom from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then having to prep and rinse and repeat every day. So I was forged in the fires of being a teacher in a Title I school. So I feel very equipped for this work. And really, it's about balance. I segment my day in part of the day is for my writing, and then part of the day is for company work. It doesn't always work that way. Some days it's all my writing, and some days it's all my company work. But I have a high level of executive functioning, I think, from being a teacher. So I just activate that. Yeah.
Well,
And I
I
sleep a
want to
lot because I need my brain.
sleep is good. I take a nap anytime I can't figure something out.
Same.
Yeah.
That's right. Knock out.
Since we're talking about that part of it, let's get into craft a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Specifically, I want to talk about fantasy because you've done a number of fantasy series. Um, do you feel like telling us a little bit about the Conjureverse and then talk about your process for creating such an expansive fantasy world?
Absolutely. So the Controverse series is my magic school series, and it is about three groups of people. One group of people who don't have magic, and two groups of people who do have magic, and it's set in our world. And these two groups of magic wielders don't get along. So we've got the Marvelers, and they believe there is something marvelous about them, which it is. And they have a magical gift called a Marvel, and it's channeled through their inner light. And long ago, they were tired of living around people who didn't have magic, and also a group of people called conjurers. Conjurers also have a light inside of them, but their light is a little different. It's like a twilight, and conjurers and marvelers don't get along. And so long ago, they decided to build a magic school in the sky and three cities so that they could leave the non-magic users and also the conjurers behind and live in the skies. And those move all over the world. And so the book really is about the first conjure student to ever go to this magic school in the sky, because at a certain point the conjurers were like, hey, this is kind of unfair for us to also be left behind with these non-magical people. And it's about sort of that conflict, and it's my sort of school integration story, if I was going to say it. And my students again inspired this because they were tired of magic schools that were over somewhere else and didn't allow for all of the students of the world to go. I had a kid ask me, you know, she spoke two different languages. And she said, if I went to magic school, like, would there be other kids who spoke my languages too? And I couldn't find a book that showcased a kid like her, that came from a family like her. And I wanted to build it. And everyone told me that there could be no new magic school. And when you tell me something like that, I'm like, "Oh, hold my beer. Now I've gotta do it," because I'm stubborn. And, yeah, they told me the children of the world didn't wanna go to any other magic school but Hogwarts, and I was like, "I'm gonna prove you wrong." And so now I'm in, like, my 12th printing of the
Yeah,
Marvelers, so
yeah, yeah.
I'm very
Um,
excited.
you've been kind enough to gift them all to my daughter. She's
Yes.
4, so it's a little above her reading level today, but
She'll get there.
she knows they came from Auntie Danielle,
Mhm.
and we'll get there one day. Um, but
And that little girl looks just like her on that cover. So it's
she loved it.
perfect.
She loves
Mm.
it. So when you create these fantasy worlds, because you've done it many times now,
Mhm.
is the world building process, like the steps you go through in your head, is that a consistent thing that you repeat, or do you find that every new universe requires a new construct or process?
So I am very process driven. I love it. It's almost ritual, like the way people make their coffee.
Mm,
So for me, I build my world first and I find out who's going to be the troublemaker in that world. So worlds come to me first. So every one of my fantasy books that I've done, even books for my company, I think of the world comes first, or the magical thing that I want to explore. So for the Controverse, I thought, what happens when everyone has magic? What is the beef? What's the issue, right? Usually magic books are about the non-magical people versus the magical people. How do we hide from them? How do we stay safe? How do we keep from that conflict, right? In a hidden world fantasy landscape. And I thought, let's have a new conversation. Let's talk about when everybody has magic, or a lot of people have them, and people don't really get along. How do we make space for each other? How do we actually talk about who defines what magic is, what is good, what is evil, what is good magic, what is bad magic. How do those things mix up when we're in a global magical environment where people are coming from all over the world? It's why I put the magic school in the sky so that it has no relationship to any nation. It means that everybody gets to go. But then what does that mean? So it's always world first for me, then character.
We have a question from the audience I just want to get to really quick. It's from Kara, and Kara's asking, how do you find a literary agent and get them interested in your work? I'm just going to take that real quick. Kara,
Great.
email me. I put my email address into the chat, and I will send you resources and speak to that in more detail. Um, for Danielle, I want to go to some of your other work that's not fantasy,
Okay.
specifically the novel you co-wrote, Tiny Pretty Things, which was adapted
Hmm.
into a Netflix television show. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to that process of adaptation, whatever you feel like sharing, because I find it infinitely fascinating as someone who would love to have an adaptation of something one day. And I think it's something that the viewers might be curious about as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when you sit down and you think through, like, what are the holy grail things that a writer wants? They want to see their work on the big screen or the small screen, right? To see their imagination translated. And it was cool going on set, seeing my imagination translated, right? And so the process was wrote the book. The book did fine. It wasn't a bestseller. It was solidly mid-list, doing its thing. But a production company said, "Oh, we think that a show about ballet and ballerinas." I used to work at a pre-professional ballet school. So the book came out of my experience being a teacher there, teaching them English. My students were ballerinas. This was before I moved to Harlem and became a librarian. And so I used that to build this world. And it's, people love that insular world. And so they stepped forward and they said, "Hey, we think this would make for a great TV show." I was like, "All right." They optioned the book for not very much money, $5,000, which sounds like a lot. But once you pay taxes and once you pay your literary agent and once you pay your film agent, and those are percentages, 15%, then another 15%, it's really no money. However, Netflix was very excited about it. They loved the pilot, they loved the characters, but I wasn't involved. And so I learned a lesson about not being involved means that people break the tools in your sandbox and and all your toys, the things that you've made. And so when they translated it for TV, they changed character names, they changed character backgrounds, they changed the location from New York to Chicago. They took out It was a Russian ballet school. They took all of that out. They stripped it for parts and then they remixed it and they kept some things the same and some things different. And it was very stressful because some of the things that they added press down on some of, like, I'm a teacher, and so they had some, inappropriate relationships between teachers and students in the show, and they made it TVMA, so there was a lot of sex. So my teachers who love my work and my librarians who loved my work, and I'm in that community, were like, "We can't read the book and watch the show." Like, our students love the book and now their parents are getting mad that the show is a little raunchy. And I was like, I had nothing to do with it. But the easy people to find online are the authors. So I got so much hate mail, so many bad tweets, so many, I had to take my email down and close my DMs and all of that. So there were very high highs. I mean, seeing that your name is at the end of the credits of a Netflix show, having the name of my show be the name of my book, but it didn't sell any copies. So very few because it didn't align with the source material. So that was a letdown too. So there were some pits and peaks. It was still a great experience in that now I have a Netflix show, whether I like it or not, and it brings other people to me to want to make other things out of my work. So that's great. But it isn't actually a representation of what I actually made. It's not a representation of the book. So,
So
and I sometimes forget about it most of the time. I'm like, "Oh, right, I have a Netflix show." Oops.
well, it brings to mind an interesting follow-up then. Like, how do you how do you protect yourself in those situations now? And how could anyone, someone who's maybe like going through it for the first time, you have a bit of pedigree now, so I imagine that also helps and leveraging those conversations. But how would someone going through it for the first time try to protect themselves, and how do you protect yourself now?
Yes. So, a couple of lessons when you're talking to producers, making sure that you negotiate and you have a team, a good team that negotiates, that you're in the room, meaning that you're an executive producer, that you get to see scripts, that you get to weigh in, that you get to be involved in the making of the thing, not as a deterrent, but more as like like as a partner in there. And so now I am an executive producer on all of the things that are adapted of my work. And coming to the realization that the book and the translation will never like align up perfectly, but wanting to make sure that they have captured the spirit of your work, because production people come and go and move. The name that they remember is your name because it's your book. And when they Google that and when they see that, you're the person that they can get to. So making sure that you recognize and realize that you're the easy face to punch when people are mad about
Mhm.
something that's going on. And making sure that you're asking really strong questions about why a producer or why a studio wants to make your particular piece of material and how they see it. And especially when it's an adaptation from your book, making sure that you realize that the more it's aligned to the thing you made, there is a correlation sometimes to better sales of your book. And for me, all roads lead to the book, the thing that I made myself. So I want that thing to sell. So I will always push for them to align more closely to the source material. So, and just be flexible as well.
Thank you for that. Um, Hold on, we have a question from the audience from
Yes.
Allison. Do you think these discussions on content can happen upfront before Netflix buys it?
Unfortunately, no, because they're only looking at a pilot and an overview of the season, usually, if it's going to be a TV show. With a film, it's different because they want to see sort of their entire script. So you can, but usually they're seeing a pilot or an overview and a pitch deck. So they can make changes once they really get in there. And then the writer's room comes in, and you've got, depending on how many writers are in your writer's room, they've got opinions. They're going to be writing different episodes and they're going to add what they want to add. So you lose control of your material.
Um, you've had a really fantastic career, Danya. I'm
I
curious,
appreciate that.
do you still have discouraging moments in this industry, or are you in a place where you're doing exactly what you want to do?
Oh, very discouraging moments. I feel like my career, I'm climbing the mountain, right? I've had some great milestones that I've hit, but I have a long way to go to get to the mountain, to get to the mountaintop. There's a couple of things. One, I think AI is troubling and it's troubling me, and I think about it a lot. And I think about how it's going to influence what is made, it already is, and how material reaches the marketplace. With the current things going on in the government, it is influencing what is being bought by publishers. There's a lot of obeying in advance. And so it is undoing a lot of the work that We Need Diverse Books did to sound the alarm that everybody has money to buy. They want to see themselves reflected on the page. And now we have clowns in office that are creating, you know what I mean, a whole bunch of mess, which is trickling down. So we're seeing a lot of backlash. We're seeing a lot of book bans. And so being banned in Florida and Texas and all of these places is really stressful because you get a lot of hate mail and death threats and rape threats that come with it. And it's annoying. So, like, those are very big issues that I'm seeing and feeling. And as a person that's in the marketplace for bringing debuts in and trying to make the table bigger, there are a lot of people in publishing that don't want the table to be bigger. So I'm constantly fighting against people who don't actually want to make room for new voices, even though in a capitalistic society, we can tap into new people with new money to spend. So it's lots of no's. It's lots of having to push and push and push over and over again and being labeled mean, by
Mhm.
asking direct questions, things like that. So I feel like my career, we're doing okay, but
Yeah.
I have many, many, many miles yet to walk, many more things I want to do.
And the thing you brought up about publishing, sort of moving backwards, particularly from the work we did, where we need diverse books. It's just frustrating because publishing is so slow on good decisions and quick on bad ones. And
Yes.
it seems quite obvious. Like you take a case like Target, for example, which was loud about turning away from diversity efforts and has been suffering financially ever since. You would think
Mhm.
publishing would recognize there was a great number of years where you saw the good that diversity did for you. The pushback now because of a few loud and wrong voices is ridiculous to me. That could be a whole nother
Mhm.
episode of the webinar, but I'm going to keep it going. You touched on it a little bit though, like what it could possibly be like over the next few years when you factor in AI and some of the backwards thinking we deal with in our industry. Do you see positives in the next, say, 5 years, particularly for IP story companies like yours?
Yes, positives meaning that we're going to have to get really scrappy about how to get stories out. Young
Hmm.
people are consuming media in different ways, and they are bypassing the traditional normal things that have been happening, and publishing is very slow. So I see a lot more in the, interactive stories, self-publishing spaces, doing different kinds of ways, teleplays, these enhanced audiobooks that feel like you are in a movie as you're listening with sound effects and music. So I see the ability to shake things up because publishers really don't know what they're doing anymore. They don't know how to get to market because the market has changed since COVID. Also, books and book lengths are going to get shorter because people's attention spans, because we have, especially in children's books, we have 3 or 4 years of young people who were out of school whose literacy rates suffered because of it. So therefore, we have to catch up and get everyone back on their reading levels. And we've got to get sort of hate out of office so that people can feel more joyful about making anything and everything. Because when you can't eat and when you have no health care and when you have people menacing you when you go to the grocery store, officers that want to lock people up, you're not very excited about stories or books. And so we've got to get that cloud away so that we can actually get back to the fun stuff where people are excited about going to the movies, about getting that book, about going to a midnight release, about going to a book club, all of those kinds of things. Right now, I see a
I,
depression for the next 2 years, and then we'll come out of it.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. I can't wait to get to a time when the storm cloud has passed.
Hmm.
We got a question from Anonymous. What are your thoughts about self-publishing?
I think it's a great space. I think that what I don't like is that they pit self-publishing authors against traditionally published authors, which is silly.
Hmm.
And Lamar, you and I come from a community that had to self-publish. We were
Yeah,
boxed out
yeah,
of traditional publishing for decades. And so it is a robust and really exciting space. I don't like the snobbery where self-published authors feel less than or are made to feel that way, even though
yeah,
they're doing some of the most interesting work outside of the machine. And my goal too, when I look at my sort of what do I want to do next? What do I want to do in the future? I want to be a hybrid author. I will
yeah,
definitely enter the self-publishing trenches because I think that publishers are a small group of people in New York City with a certain set of privileges that curate the bookstores for the rest of the country, and it is unfair. They are leaving money on the table, and I'm going to go get some of that money. And so yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
and I've done both. I'm a big advocate for if you're in publishing, learning all aspects of the business. And so, like you said, I don't like how the online discourse, which I think is a little bit manufactured and
Mhm.
exaggerated, pits self-published authors against traditional authors. I would just say just stay off those platforms and write your books.
That's
But
right.
yeah, I agree. I think there's opportunity to be had all over, and you should not let strangers in New York City decide your right or fate.
That's right. Absolutely. Because then otherwise we won't write.
Yeah. We got about 15 minutes left, so I have some questions still, but I'm going to remind the audience we have the Q&A box at the bottom. If you have something you want to ask Dhonielle or me, please put your questions in. My next question for you, Dhonielle, I'm just curious about this, and I've never asked you this before. Who are your biggest influences in writing and business?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's start with writing. I think my biggest influences when I think of who built my imagination, right? Who I feel like I'm chasing. I always think of it, and I tell writers to figure out who are your creative rabbits and who are your creative foxes. Your rabbits are the ones that you're chasing in terms of like you think about their career and you're like, I could do something like that. The foxes are like the titans where it's like they came in at a different time and place. I'm never going to be able to get them, but like their work is foundational to my work. So some of my creative foxes would be like Stephen King,
Yes.
like what he's made and the like the depth and the breadth of the types of things that of his work, his imagination is like unparalleled.
Hmm.
So he's someone who I can't catch him. He's a
Yeah.
like I can't catch
Yeah.
him. I can't even write as much as he's written. I
Right.
can't, and I'm a person with a lot of ideas, but he's definitely one. Um, I would say in terms of my creative rabbits, and maybe this is a creative fox too, but Philip Pullman
Yeah.
is a person whose imagination you can see or see me in conversation with if you're a fantasy writer. His themes, the way that he thinks of analog technology, that is exactly what I do in my work. I am interested in analog tech. I'm interested in big themes. That's someone I'm in conversation with. Octavia Butler is a creative fox of mine, who's someone where she's having conversations about my community in a speculative landscape. um, Other creative foxes or rabbits. I really like the work of Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think she's really
Yeah.
savvy. That's
Yes. Yeah.
business. On the business side, where she's been able to really carve out a readership through her interests. She writes about what she's interested
Yeah.
in these insular worlds. So she is definitely someone, Virginia Hamilton. Her her work built my imagination as well. Mildred Taylor, Julius Lester. So all of sort of the great titans of Black American children's book, children's literature built my brain. So all of them as well.
We've got some questions coming in from the
Okay.
audience. This is from Frank. How do you use social media to promote your work?
Ugh, I hate social media, but
It's-
what I do is I absolutely hate it because I grew up with a payphone, and the dial-up before, and like I was like, what is this? And I hate it. And I hate the pressure of it. However, what I've decided was I was going to pick one thing that I like to do and just do that. So I like writing newsletters and posts on Substack. So I've been doing that. I'm very happy. I've been happily doing that for a couple of months. And then I like putting some things up on Instagram. And so what I try to do is just shout, make a little noise about what I'm making and invite my readers in to see how I make the things that I make and what I'm up to. And that's about all I have the capacity to do because I'm an outgoing introvert. So I'm really just a house cat that really doesn't want to go outside much and doesn't really want anyone looking in my windows. So yeah, I try my best. I could do much better, but you're not going to find me dancing on TikTok.
I
And
echo the
maybe I
sentiment.
should.
No, I mean, hey, if you feel like it, go for it, D. I wouldn't, I'll give you a like, but I don't want to do that stuff either. It's like I've experimented with some of it over the years, and I probably could have been better too. But the algorithm knows what you're trying to do, and so it's really gotten to a point where you get throttled down if you're not paying for it.
Yeah.
And so I use it more for fun, and I let people know what I'm doing. But I have a lot of the same sentiment you have about it, Danielle.
Yeah, I feel uncomfortable because I feel
Yeah,
like I'm tap dancing
yeah.
um most of the time. And so I'm trying to have an authentic connection and change that and not to see it as a bad thing because it is the way of the world.
Hmm.
And you and I want to just do what Suzanne Collins does. She doesn't even have a cell phone.
I don't know what Suzanne Collins looks like. That's amazing to me.
I've
She
seen her
has
once.
but to your point, like I said, I could be better about it. Maybe it's time to get some help from the younger generation. I got my nephew
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
could give me a hand. But yeah, I'm in the same boat social media wise. Susie just wants to thank us for doing this. You're
Oh,
welcome, Susie.
thank you, Susie.
Let's see. We got a question from Stacy. Have you seen some publishing houses move away from what you said, which is having people in New York making decisions for the rest of the country? Are they expanding who makes decisions?
I think that they were. We Need Diverse Books was putting a lot of pressure, and a lot of other groups, POC in publishing. There were several really great activist groups putting pressure on publishers to make sure that they are hiring diversely and expansively. I do think that COVID broke up the whole, like, you have to live in New York to work in publishing, because now people are working from different places, so that does help. But when we look at who's making the decisions and buying books, they're still coming from a certain demographic. So, and we're backsliding. So we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work.
This is my question, Danielle. What's a piece of advice you received early on that still guides you today?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I um got was from one of my mentors when I was first entering the business, and she's a big editor and also writer. And she said to figure out what I want to say before I enter the publishing industry. What do I want to say with my work? What are the things that I want to leave behind? How do I want my body of work to speak about me? So that when all of the stuff, the bad stuff, and some of the good stuff, some of the distractions, when all that stuff starts coming at you, you stay tethered to the things that you want to say. And I always wanted to set a table for all readers to come to, but to center readers that looked like me as a little kid and looked like you, Lamar, as a little kid, but invite
Mm,
all readers to my table to eat. But I didn't get enough, my imagination was not fed enough stories of magic, um, and mischief and horror and, all of those things in genre when I was a young person. So I figured that out before I entered. And so I try to work from that constellation of like what I want to leave behind when I am just a little tree somewhere in a cemetery. So,
well, I'll drop a little gem that stuck with me over the years. I can't
mhm.
even remember where I first heard this, but a little makes a lot. It's
Mm,
almost impossible to sit down and write a book, but if you sit down and write a sentence enough times, you have a book. So incremental
yes,
progress. Um,
absolutely. Little by little. I used to
um,
only have 3 hours a week to write,
hmm hmm
and I did
And
it.
consistency wins. Frank says thank you for sharing your wisdom.
I love it.
Let's
No, I
see.
appreciate
What would what would
it.
present day Danielle tell 12-year-old Danielle if
Oh
you had
boy.
the opportunity to sit down with her?
Probably to make better skincare decisions. That would be number one. Because I had really bad acne. But in terms of this, I would say, like, don't let other people pull you away from the thing that you love the most, which is reading. That, like, the thing that you love to do, like, I went to the bookstore with my dad every single Saturday, bookstore, comic book store, and then we'd get a soda. Like, that was the routine. Like, that thing, like, that made me a nerd, that made people make fun of me, that made people be like, "Oh, you're weird." Like, stay weird, kid. That's what I would tell her. Stay weird, read those books, keep those notebooks, keep writing those things down. Like, yes, people stare at you when you're always reading books, and yes, you're going to get in trouble in school for like not doing your math and reading that book because you're obsessed with it. But that is going to help you build your life out of letters. Um, and that it is the coolest thing in the world, because as a nerdy kid with glasses starting in first grade who only wanted to read, you can imagine how I was teased. And people being like, "You're so strange. Why do you have all those books? Like, why don't you do something else?" And it was like, I'm doing the thing that I want to do, which is to be in these books. And yeah, and to keep bothering my librarian.
Uh, the,
Because I
the,
bothered her
the,
a lot, and I
the,
always felt bad about it. But like, don't feel guilty about it. Keep going.
the teasing thing resonated with me as a short kid
Yeah,
in a sports town who doesn't play sports. It comes up a lot in my books. The library is a place where bullies don't hang out.
that's right.
So,
They're not there. They really aren't. It really is, and I do speeches for librarians all the time, and I talk about the library as a sanctuary. It
Mhm.
is a safe space for all of those misfits, all of the kids that had a hard time. Be in there. And it's a place where you can build your imagination, and it's quiet, it's
Hmm.
safe, it's clean. Your librarian could be a little grumpy, but like it was always my safe place. And I love the smell of books. So that
Yeah.
makes me even more weird because I would just open them and be like, ah, especially the new ones. It's the glue. It's like, and it's just the promise. It's the
Yeah.
promise of adventure. And I grew up small town in Maryland, not much to do. Everyone was on horses and stuff. I was terrified of horses. I was bored, sent to a farm in Mississippi every summer. What did I have? My books and my notebook and my pencil. And I had a great little boring childhood. And now I
Yeah.
here I am.
No, I mean, you were doing exactly what you were meant to do. Um,
Right. And who knew? Failing
yeah.
chemistry and not becoming a doctor made me into I'm just a nerd, a bookworm.
Well, we're lucky to have you, D. Um,
Yes.
Amy says she thanks us both for our time and insights and our hope and belief that this will be better in 2 years. Sheila thanks us as well. She says this was lovely. So glad to hear about your transition from reader to writer to librarian's role. And then we got a question from Anne. This will probably be our wrap up. What
Okay.
were your favorite books growing up?
And I want to know yours too.
Sure.
The ones that I read over and over again that fell apart that my parents were like, let's move on from these. All of Madeline Engle's Wrinkle in Time, all of those novels. Harriet the Spy, loved it. The Borrowers, The Phantom Toll Booth,
Yes.
um, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, all of Virginia Hamilton's books. Uh, and then once I got to like, and then The Hobbit, and then once I was trying to get enough to read on my dad's bookshelf because my dad is a science fiction fantasy nerd. And I wanted to read Stephen King's The Gunslinger. I wanted to read Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. And he was like, you're not ready. And I was like, you're right. And then at 14, he gave me Interview with the Vampire. Changed my
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
I met Anne. And
Yeah.
once I met Anne, it was like gateway drug to all horror, fantasy fiction, all of that stuff. And he just let me read as much as I wanted. So yeah,
Yeah.
I built my bridge to Anne Rice.
Yeah. For me, it was the childhood books were Phantom Toll Booth, Bunnicula,
Yes. But Nicola the
Bunnicula.
Vampire Bunny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
All
So
the
good.
Choose Your Adventure books.
Okay.
And then
Yep.
I made the leap to Stephen King, and when I read it, that absolutely changed my entire world. Um,
Lamar.
I got a
Not
whole it shrine
Pennywise.
in my office. It's
I We have spoken about Pennywise before. He is a thing of the nightmares, but like that tells you how good Stephen King is. I will never forget it for the
yeah,
rest of my life. It is
yeah.
in one of the creases of my brain is that character.
Oh,
I will never
absolutely.
see a clown and not think of Stephen King. I'm like
But
scared, terrified.
but on the Stephen King clown shout out, we are at time. Um,
Mm,
Thank you so much, Danielle, for
thank you.
being a guest on our last webinar of the semester. For everyone out there, we're not going to stop. It's the end for this year, but we're already planning some incredible conversations for the spring. We got some exciting guests that we'll be announcing. Pay attention to William and Mary's social media, to the library website. Again, thank you, Dhonielle Clayton. Thank you, everyone who
Thank you.
came out. Enjoy your holiday, and we'll be back soon.